Welcome everybody. We're doing another live Perceptive podcast here on the Twitch stream. As always, I'm Josh Beiser from GameWisdom.com, where we examine the art and science of games. And we have a very great night planned for you folks, or for those of you watching this recorded on our YouTube channel. We're going to be talking about Shovel Knight, game design, and we got a few great folks from Yacht Club Games here to help us out. But first, as always, my co-host and contributor, James Ellerby.
Howdy, guys.
Hey, James, it's great to have you on. I know you missed our chat with David. I think that was about a month ago, but I
Yes.
think this will be a great one as well.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
So, for you guys over there at Yacht Club, if you wouldn't mind introducing yourselves to the audience.
Sure. My name is Nick Wozniak. Most people here call me Woz, and I do animation and art stuff and lots of other company stuff.
And I'm Sean Velasco, and I do game design and direction, and also lots of other stuff. We all do lots of other stuff here.
We also all dabble into each other's things.
Yeah, we dabble into each other's things all the time.
Yeah, I'm gonna leave that one there.
Good.
And I love Diet Coke.
Great, we
So
got
does
the ad
Woz.
revenue. I don't have anything. I have water here. Maybe we can get some ad revenue going that way. So, for those of you watching this, we are streaming this of the day. I believe today is the day that Spectre Knight came out for the other platforms, right? It was available on as a Switch launch, and today is the Spectre Knight for real, for everyone else, I mean.
It's on some other platforms.
almost everybody else.
Almost all of them.
Everybody is Steam, right?
Steam is out. Steam is out.
Yeah.
Is PlayStation out? I think not yet.
No, it's right. We're in the launch week, so you'll be getting it throughout once it's approved, and I don't know, it won't be a week. It'll be longer than that, I'm sure. But
We're working every day is
Yeah.
we're doing submissions, trying to get it out. I'm sure we failed lot check at some point, and we're having to re-sub. But it's all almost done, so it should
Yeah.
all be all out really, really super soon if it's not already.
Yeah, in case you guys don't know, what happens when you finish a game is you declare it's done internally, and then you send it to somebody, you send it to Nintendo or Sony or Xbox or whoever, and they make sure that it's up to par and up to standard for what they look for. So they'll make sure, for example, that load screens don't last longer than a certain amount of time if nothing's going on screen.
Yeah, or if you
Over.
eject the disc
Yeah.
and put it back in over and over and over again, does that mess the game up?
Yeah, which we don't worry about if it's digital.
Right, yeah.
But there's lots of stuff like that, and so but they have to test every version of the game, and so Shovel Knight for PlayStation is different. For PlayStation 4 is different than PlayStation 3, different than Vita, different than even the different languages. US is different than EU, and so they have to test each one, and not sequentially, but they just don't come in all at the same time. So
Right.
Yeah.
So
that's why it's kind of staggered.
It's almost there. It's
Yeah.
really, really close. I'm not doing much on it.
No.
I'm done. But
You're done. You can sit back and relax.
Not me personally, but someone.
Yeah,
does
that's
it.
why you're talking to us.
Yeah,
right?
that's why you're talking to us and not them. Because they're over there doing it right now.
Yeah.
So, for you guys, have you been with Yacht Club since the beginning?
Yeah, we're two of the founders.
Yep.
Ooh.
Awesome. As I told David last month, definitely a congratulations to you guys and the rest of Yacht Club for Shovel Knight. I know when I talked to David, he said that you guys have been working on for 80 years at this point between the Kickstarter
Yeah,
and everything.
Yeah, that's for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we've been working on it since December of 2012.
Yeah.
That's when the idea happened,
Yeah.
right? And the Kickstarter was in 2013.
Yeah, we weren't really a company until 2013, but yeah, I guess if you counted all the hours spent on Shovel Knight, they would add up to way more
Like
than
a
it should
billion,
be.
5 billion.
Yes,
5 jillion hours.
Yeah.
Yeah, so as we've spoken to David several times in the past, it's really amazing about the concept of Shovel Knight being released in the modern market. We've talked about this idea of, I guess, quote-unquote, modern retro games that we've been seeing more of these days. Games that are either aimed aesthetically or design-wise to look like something from the 8-bit or 16-bit era. And
Right.
Shovel Knight was kind of one of the like the first like big names in that front, at least when it was announced back in like 2012, I think you guys said. Again, time has no meaning for us anymore. We've been doing this for so long; it's hard to keep track.
Yeah. Well, that's not true. Like Mega Man 9 and 10 came out in like 2009 or 2010, and those were like very true to NES.
Yeah, like those were in 4.3. Like those had sprite flickering.
It was more accurate than Shovel Knight.
Much more accurate.
Then there had been like Super Meat Boy had come out before us, and like a few other. I mean, like I guess Meat Boy isn't really trying to have sort of the same exact aesthetic.
No, not any like direct reference to it, but it still feels like you know.
Yeah.
But platform, I guess.
But Mega Man did. Just like everything we made, Mega Man did it first.
Somebody did.
Or DuckTales too.
Or DuckTales, or Zelda, or everyone. Yeah.
Well, I think it's just really cool that you guys are still able to make your character very like stand out among a lot of those other. I mean, DuckTales is really recognizable for numerous reasons. You know, I mean, Mega Man, like, okay, it's on its how many iteration? You know what I mean? And for Shovel Knight to really like, I've heard a lot of my friends where I showed them Shovel Knight for the first time, and they're like, did I play that as a kid? And I'm like, no, you're 35. So no, I don't think you played that as a kid.
Yeah, I think when we first were showing it off I was showing it off to like members of my family, and my sister-in-law was like, we were showing it to her and talking about it, and she hadn't seen it yet, and she was excited to see it. And then when she first saw it, she's like, wait, why does it look so bad? Like, it looks so old. No, that's the point. It's supposed to be, you know.
That's always the fun part when you're explaining that to non-gamers. Why didn't you make a modern-looking game? You know,
why does it look so bad?
And then everyone's heart just sunk that day.
Yeah, like her husband was like, no, shut up. It's great.
Parents just don't understand.
No.
Yeah, totally.
Now, another thing that came with the Spectre Knight expansion or the update is also the body swap or the palette swap options for the characters. And I know when I spoke with Dave about this last month, we got into a little bit about discussing some about the work that went into it. But for you guys, what was kind of like the challenge or some of the work that went into figuring out, you know, the male and female versions of these characters?
It's like, I think the hardest part was just trying to make it seem like we weren't making characters that were like cross-dressing, or that we weren't making characters that were just like a rip-off of the character that was already there, kind of.
Yeah, like it's a weird balance to strike, because you want the character to be the same character. Like the idea is that that it's the same personality in a different body. Like there's no difference there, and so you can have just like, you know, like the. The way we talked about it was that, you know, you can think of it like their, I don't know, like masculinity was on a line, and if they're this much masculine, then going the other way, they should be like that much feminine. And so like characters like Polar Knight, which are like very masculine but also really bulky, you know, the female Polar Knight is also very like feminine but also pretty bulky. So like you kind of separate which aspects of the character describe the feminine versus masculine, and pull those apart and kind of play with them, and that finding the right balance was like really pretty difficult, I think.
Right, like we didn't want to just put Shovel Knight in a dress. Right. But like, I think overall it was just looking at each character very, very carefully. And also, I mean, the female characters that we had to make a male version of, it was like the same thing.
Yes.
Just like trying to make sure that the personality is really maintained. That was like the biggest challenge. But I don't know, I think it was really fun just to make a lot of different cool designs. And I mean, we loved that Adventure Time Fiona and Cake. Like just seeing all the visuals of the designs for those characters were really cool. And I think we did something that's at least like kind of similar to that.
Satisfies us for that same level.
Yeah. And one of the things that's really cool about the Shovel Knight character is that it is a very like striking character in the sense that it's someone that's immediately recognizable.
Yes, very much so.
And that's definitely a hallmark, especially of the 8-bit eras. Again, like we talked about characters like Mega Man, Mario, even something like Scrooge McDuck or the whole Capcom era 2D games. You know, you can see these characters and you immediately know who they are. And
Yeah.
I guess going from that point, when you guys were coming with way back with the original design of Shovel Knight, did that original form of Shovel Knight go through multiple iterations, or did it come very quickly in terms of how you want Shovel Knight to look?
I mean, I would say it was really pretty clear from the get go.
Yeah, like we drew. It was like we drew the drawing on scrap, and I did a crappy pixel version of it, and then Woz fixed it and made a much better version of it.
And then we made a bunch of assets that day.
And then that was it. That was
oh wow.
That's still in the game. Yeah.
Which I'm not sure is actually pretty that's pretty weird. I think.
That's almost never does that happen.
There's not a single other character that happened to.
Oh wow.
But we just had an idea for what we wanted his visuals to be, and it made sense, and it was appealing, and the colors worked, and it was a good anchor.
Yeah, at some point soon we're going to be really starting to work on a new project that's not Shovel Knight. And I'm kind of quaking in my boots of how are we going to make something that looks like it seems that part actually seemed easy.
Yes.
But
that's also the hardest part.
Yeah,
I feel like.
Yeah, I mean between having I don't know the Viking horns and the Boba Fett helmet kind of with the T-shape. I don't know. It was once it was down, it just seemed like that was really the natural way to do it. There wasn't a big long process for the knights. For the rest of the Order of No Quarter, a lot of them went through a ton of revisions to get to where they were. But Shovel Knight, he was pretty much the same from when we envisioned him.
Yeah. Wow,
interesting.
Yeah. I think that just goes to show Shovel Knight when it started was not a good idea. Everything I mean we were just talking about this. It's not every idea is almost equally good in the beginning, but we've kept working on it and kept trying to improve it, and everyone in the team has added their bit to it, and we've all been headed toward the same direction. And now that the game is done and you're looking at it, it's whoa, this game is cool, or this character is cool, or he's so well realized or well thought out. But it didn't start out like that, right? It started out very, very prototypical and simple, and then we just added on to it as we went.
Yeah. And another major part of Shovel Knight, I know you guys have probably written several articles about it. There's been several posts from Yacht Club about, has been the art style. And again, having this game look like something out of late 80s, early 90s. And as we've said, it's one of those things that it makes the game just very striking. You can put up a screenshot of Shovel Knight, and you can confuse people and say, this game was released in 1988. You must have missed it then. You never.
Yeah. Right.
Did you? I'm pretty sure I asked this of David probably several times, but for the folks listening and just to refresh my memory, was the aesthetic, that 8-bit look of Shovel Knight, was that decided very early on in the process, or did it come later in the development?
Yeah, that was pretty early on. That was before even the look of what Shovel Knight would be was decided on, because it's not just a factor of what we love. It's also a factor of we were 5 people at the time, and so it's hard to do a game that has too much fidelity in the density of the pixels. We just looked at what our team could do. One person did the vast majority of the pixel art, and that was me. And I couldn't do it if it was 16-bit.
Yeah,
that'd be way too much, and I couldn't and beyond. So
we couldn't make a big 3D game.
Yeah,
and not that we would want to, right? And I guess that's the other part of the inspiration is this is something that we really wanted to make. So it was doing a Kickstarter where we thought we could do it all by ourselves without needing a lot of freelance help or a huge amount of money basically that we'd have to spend on a bunch of animations, as well as making something that the whole team was really passionate and excited about doing. It was really kind of a win-win. Yeah. And I don't know, as time has gone by, everything has gotten more more animated and more complex, so it's we're pushing the boundaries a little bit of the visuals, but I don't know, it seems like it's been kind of a natural evolution.
Yeah. And it kind of reminds me of, James, if you remember, we were just speaking with the developer for Battle Brothers the other day, this week. Well, again, for those of you watching this recorded, it will probably be earlier than that. But we were talking about how they settle on the design of their art set, which is the characters being represented by these little tiny busts. And
Yeah.
like he was like saying that, yeah, it looks like it. We all came together. That was what we figured, but we were just throwing stuff against the wall. We just had to pick something that was cost effective, and it just kind of came out of that. Like out of this necessity came
Yeah.
this aesthetic that worked and it tied everything together.
Yeah, it's one of the most beautiful things about game creation and just game designers at a whole. There's so many stories out there of very famous characters, not just in video game design, but in animation design that came out just through sheer minimalism and or inability of technology.
Yeah.
Well, this guy looks that way because we couldn't make him look any other way.
Yeah,
So,
of course.
I think
that's so amazing.
I mean, famously, that's why Mega Man is blue.
Yeah.
It's like the palette just doesn't work for reds, and I think that like working in limitations is not only it's like fun as developers of game, but it's also like fun as a game player. Like you understand that like there's restrictions on what you can do, and therefore you're like you can really push yourself in those restricted elements.
You can like focus on what you can do.
Yeah, like rules make a game good, I think, and I think that's like
And having clear
clear,
rules.
understood rules. And that's like that's not just like video games. Like I've been playing a lot of board games recently, and every single time I open a board game and like the rule book is like thick, I just like I want to throw it away.
Yeah,
because like I have to like dig so far to get to the fun part.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah.
I was gonna say, when I was in college, we had a game. We had to design board games, like in early like game design 1 or whatever.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, we had to design board games, and the teacher said, make sure that you really thought through your rules really well, and make sure that you have printable manuals, and that you have them for everyone in the whole class. And then the day came where because we had to play everyone's games in class. And so it's like I handed him the manual, and he just like throws it, and he's like, "Yeah, we don't." Like I was just like lying. I just wanted to make sure you like thought through the game. just explain it to everybody, right?
Use your words.
Yeah. It's like I guess the moral of the story is like if you need a manual that big, then like there's already a problem with your game design.
Yeah. Over the weekend, I opened a game, and it was like the manual was literally like bound like a the comic, I forget what they're called, but like the collections of comics where you get like 10 issues at once, and it's
a trade paperback.
So when you get like a trade paperback and it's like the anthology of these 5 comics, the instructions were literally bound that way, and the box is super thick, and there's like 1,000 chits and like different game boards and stuff. And it was the Orcs Must Die board game, and I think
wow.
I want to get into it because it's some interesting stuff going on. And I opened it, and like there were people over, like some friends were over, and like we just started taking stuff out, and then we're like, no, and we start putting that stuff back in. It's like I gotta like play around by myself to like really understand how it works before I can like introduce it. But I think that's like a really indicative way of like the way people think. It's like people don't like too many exceptions and clauses and words and and reading. It's like it's really like as we approach Shovel Knight making it, it was like let's do a thing where you understand what it is immediately. When you see a stream of it, you can like tell what the player is thinking about. You know, like at a moment to moment basis almost. Yeah. So
and that's one of like the purities of 2D design as well. It's something that you don't need an advanced 3D camera to keep the screenshot or keep the perfect image in there. You just have the 2D screen, and you basically have that frame, screen by screen, of what's going on. And it's one of those reasons why we've talked about this before, that it's very doubtful that 2D games will be going away. Like I think there's still not only a very healthy market, but it's still a very viable form of design for either like from the independent front, even from like AA or AAA developers trying to really push the boundaries of graphic design. Like Vanillaware would be a really good example of that.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, with limitations comes a lot of creativity. Yeah. So I think no matter what, if you're making a 2D game or a 3D game, I mean, it's the same thing as like using any type of technology, right? Like if you're gonna shoot film and use a bunch of CG, or if you're just gonna like do it in your house with like really cheaply, like you can make extremely compelling experiences with both of those approaches. It just depends on what you're doing, right?
Or putting together a live show in the comfort of your I'm not even sure, like my little office slash closet room here. Making the most out of very little, I guess, is the moral of the story here.
Yeah.
But as you guys were saying regarding game development, being able to understand your limitations and work with them is a very important skill. And we've seen a lot of games, especially from the early access and crowdfunding side, tend to basically get weighed down by just trying to fit everything and anything they can come up with into the game. And
Yeah.
unfortunately, if you don't understand your limitations, you can end up with just like a mess of nothing. You have a lot of ideas, but nothing like working in sync with each other.
Yeah. Yeah, I think we work really hard to have a very unified direction before we get started. Even if that direction is just kind of like a feeling of like, oh, well, we're going for something that feels more simple, or we're going for something that feels like it should be challenging in this way, but not the other way, or it should it should be this puzzly
Mm-hmm.
or this actiony, or it should be a feel about this long. I mean, just by having I guess just by having that kind of information available, it helps everyone
Mm-hmm.
know if they're, because everyone's creative and everyone has a million cool
Yeah.
ideas that would probably all make cool games, right?
Mm-hmm.
But
Yeah.
but we just need to choose which ones are the ones that are going to make this game. And so by having a really clear direction
Mm-hmm.
from the get-go, even if that direction is nebulous, I think that helps all of us. And
Yeah.
it's not like, it's not like Waz or me are like king god centralized directors of everything, and we're saying like, oh, the gameplay should be like this. It's like the ideas come from everywhere.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
and it's much more that the best idea wins than a person. Like,
Yeah.
we don't have like seniority or like
Mhm.
roles
Yeah.
here even necessarily.
No, and deciding on that thing in the beginning,
Mm-hmm.
it gives every conversation a crux. It
Yeah.
gives a reason to like have a conversation. So
Yeah.
like you can have a really crazy idea, and then if there's a crux, if there's like a thing that like unifies what the game will
Mhm.
be, you can kind of bring that back to
Yeah.
and it can go crazy. You can have a weird element of the game that you wouldn't have had if that person hadn't spoken up in a weird way. But like having something that we can all agree that like drives the game's core is like really important from the beginning.
Yeah.
And it gives everyone buy-in also.
Yeah, right.
So if we're all agreeing this is where we're going,
Mhm.
then we're all enforcing an idea that we had together,
Mhm.
as opposed to following someone's like blindly following someone's leadership, which like doesn't
Right.
lead everyone to kind of like think for themselves and come up with cool solutions to whatever problem there may be.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we've talked about this several times, or probably multiple times at this point, with other developers about just how important it is to get that core gameplay loop, or the foundation of your game, either decided or at least solidified as early as you can. And as you guys said, it allows you to then take that going forward, so that if someone comes up with some crazy outreach or crazy idea, as long as it can be tied back into the original foundation, it can at least have some merit. It's not like everyone is just going out and thinking 50 random ideas for games that have no real basis, essentially.
Yeah, and you get to what's more common is that like somebody likes to think about one thing as opposed to the other. Like one of the guys here he likes to think about the design and the visuals of something, and almost to like and not worry about too much else. It's like, can this be like an alligator, and can he be like flying in the air? It's like, well, what does that mean? Like,
How does that circle back to the gameplay?
Let's bring it back to like the gameplay. And when you have like a really clear idea and everybody like knows where the conversation is going, they can say, well, I don't really know, but I like the idea of him moving up and down a lot. And it's like then you like kind of like bring that back into like a more roundabout way of like designing a character or whatever.
Yeah, and once again, because everyone contributed to it, then everyone feels like they have ownership over it, which is really cool.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And it's
the
funny,
con-
like,
the-
yeah. I was gonna say,
Well, I
like,
was going to
learn
say, the contrast to
both
that
ways.
is that you have one person who's saying what all the ideas are, and they have a list, and if you don't follow the list, then you don't really get to like then it's not going to go in the game, and that results in someone like not having buy-in and not feeling like they own the product, and like they can't really get behind it, and then you get less creativity because there's no one person that can drive an entire game's production and company and everything. And so when you have I think as far as like in my experience, when you have one person that drives everything, every single decision, and has ultimate authority, it can ruin a game, it can ruin a production and a team.
Yeah, and that's one of the more interesting things about game development is that we've seen so many different kinds of teams and organizational structures. And I know James can probably agree with me on this, but like it's always interesting how like no two teams are always 100% alike. Everyone has their own
Yeah,
way of
yeah.
designing. Everyone
Yep.
has their own philosophy there.
Very, very much so. And although, like, especially for a lot of young developers, like all you guys that have that big idea in your head of, oh, I'm going to make the greatest game. No, you won't. You're going to be part of a team
Hmm.
that has the chance to make the great game. Play well with others.
There,
Learn it.
you're
Yeah.
the chance of like I know people want to wish it, but there's very few people out there who are master programmers, master artists, and master designers. Oh, and they also compose all their own music at the same time. Like there
Yeah.
aren't too many people out there who do that.
And even the examples that I can think of, I could see where outside input would have made their
Would have
games better.
helped. Yeah.
And where we talked to a guy recently who has basically been doing that, except for music, I think, but like he's been making his own games, and it takes him forever,
Yeah.
and he has no outside perspective, and I just feel bad for him because like he's struggling.
Wow.
Like for a reason, like he if he had somebody with him, he could like really get some alleviation of like different perspective.
Oh yeah.
I imagine it's
Oh, go
being
ahead.
motivated.
Yeah.
Like just your motivation is probably. I mean, it's always cool when you see like, oh yeah, I did this cool thing. But when you're working together with people and you all see it coming together at once, I think that's a really good motivator and helps you choose and helps you get in your direction more. Also,
Yeah.
yeah, it's got to be really hard to do it on your own. That's like, yeah, I could never.
Yeah.
I could never.
Yeah, and we've talked about the merits of early access and being able to have people look at your games with so many different developers at this point. But yeah, it's very dangerous to design a game in your own little bubble because you never know what that game's going to be like when you put it in front of the entire world. And we got a question in chat.
Okay.
Let's see. Has the team had any specific problem with the gameplay being too close to the old games it's inspired, or had problems setting the differences or settling the differences slash individuality? Wow, I can't talk anymore. Of the game. The question I think was kind of related to what's been going on with ukulele at the moment because I've been seeing people. There's been a lot of negative reviews about the game adhering too much to the past, specifically to the N64 era, your Banjo Kazooies, Mario 64, stuff like that. And
Yeah.
it is a very interesting point. As we've seen, there's always been that challenge of refinement versus uniqueness when it comes to video games. You can have a game that is 100% unique, but it's so obscure. Like as you said, with like having like the instruction manual that's like 80 inches or 8 inches like thick that no one's gonna want to play it. But at the same time, you get a game that's so refined but lacks originality that people are like, well, why should I play your game when I played this, and this,
Right.
dozens of times over? And so for you guys, with Shovel Knight, obviously, as we've talked about, I know I've talked with David about this several times, it is heavily inspired by classic 8-bit games. But at the same time, it does have its own unique feel to it in a sense. Like it doesn't seem like when I play Shovel Knight, I don't feel like I don't say to myself, well, this is just like I'm playing Mario, or this is just 100% DuckTales right here, or Castlevania, or anything like that.
Yeah, I mean, I think what we did was we took those games as a starting point, and in some cases didn't even take anything as a starting point. Like I would say for Shovel Knight's character mobility, we looked at Mega Man, and and Castlevania and Mario and all that. But it's not like we weren't trying to match it up one to one at all. It's more like we were kind of noticing the types of things that those games would do, and then we were trying to do the types of things that we thought. It's like we see 1, 2, 4, and 5. It's like, well, what would 3 be? Like let's make that.
Like the feeling of playing as Mega Man connotes a sense of like weight to the character, and you're thinking about like where he is in relation to others on the vertical, when you're jumping and shooting and stuff. And so like what you're thinking about as you play that character like works well with that character. And so like how would the mobility of Shovel Knight work well to describe that character? You know, should he be running around like Mario and getting a bunch of momentum as he runs? Well, that makes him feel like really loose and kind of like the game's overall feels really
it's hard to do like precise platforming maybe with that. And like with Mega Man, we could like with Mega Man enemies is an example I bring up sometimes where we'll like some of the enemies we just tried to grab them and be like, okay, well, let's make something that's like very similar to this Mega Man enemy. But with Shovel Knight, it doesn't work because Mega Man is a totally ranged bullet shooting character. Shovel Knight has like a very different approach to how you would even go through the stage, to how you would battle, to anything. So it's like you can't just lift those enemy designs. You can't just lift anything. I mean, I would say the only things that were really like 100% like from other games are like the ways that like screen transitions and like the appearance and disappearance of elements and things work. But that's almost more like a hardware limitation.
That's more like this. That speaks to the style of the game more than the actual like gameplay. I think the gameplay itself is a product of us like looking at it and revising it for its own sake, and not ever saying, in the same way that we don't have one person that dictates the rules and like and says exactly what should happen. We didn't look to one source as the like end all be all for all decisions. Like we looked at all of our influences together as a group and together as like our collective history of game playing as a way to describe what we wanted, because like what we wanted the player to feel like was sort of nebulously understood, and once we all kind of like had that feeling of how the character felt work well with everybody's expectations, that's when we knew that character could work.
Wow.
I think it really just came down to being inspired by things, or to using other things as like the starting point, but then evolving absolutely everything. We didn't leave any element just how it was in an NES game. Like we tried to bring something new and fresh to it. If it was bad, like NES games are very old at this point. There's been a lot of design progress that's happened in that time. To use all of that information and all the games that we made before, right? This ain't our first rodeo. So we definitely learned a lot of lessons and had missteps on previous games also. So I think it's just like all that experience, just trying to wrap it up and make something that feels unique.
Yeah. And I think you made a really good point there about kind of elevating these elements. It's not just like saying, we're going to take the fire flower from Super Mario Brothers and one-to-one put it in our game. It could be saying, we have this fireball effect, but let's make it different. How do we take this and adapt it rather than just, again, a straight one-to-one? And
you find out, like, why does it work in Mario? Like, what makes it good in Mario? Well, like, it works well because it's faster than the player, and the speed is like really dependent on where it is, and like you're thinking about the ground in front of you and stuff. So it's like
you can't be sure. Like when you're shooting a fireball, it could bounce right over a Goomba.
Exactly.
That's like way more interesting than if it were just like going along the ground or something.
Exactly. Yeah. And so like you think about those elements together with the game as a whole, and you think, okay, they worked there because of this, and this. What do we have similar? It's like, well, that's not going to work because like we have a very set understanding of where the ground is going to be, and like we don't want to worry about like missing a character. Like that's not the fun of Shovel Knight. The fun of Shovel Knight is like doing something more direct and more combat focused. So you think about all the elements of like what your game is and what you want it to be, and you use the examples of the past to help guide you. But if you were to just take elements of the past and just rip them off 100%, you would end up with a really like not playable amalgamation of things that were fun, but don't work.
And I think that's like kind of what happens, right? It's like there will be these retro inspired games that lift that stuff, and then but it doesn't feel like it needs to go through. It needs to go through like the machine. It needs to go through like the process of understanding and like coming back out.
Why it's there, not just put it in there just because someone remembered it, essentially.
Right.
Yes, exactly.
Right.
Yeah. And I think that is definitely one of the great parts about Shovel Knight is that it really does feel like an elevated take on these old school games. Yes, it looks like something from late 80s, early 90s, but it plays, again, it has a lot of unique elements to it, and as people were talking about in chat, like it has a lot more like modern concessions in the form, like there is no live systems, there's no we don't have to worry about, repeating a level if we die. But of course, you then threw in the ability that you can break the checkpoints and not use them as, a way to get around that. And again, like if this was just a straight 1-to-1, we would have a live system. It would be a much different game in that respect.
Yeah, absolutely.
Now another question from chat. It looks like, what do you guys feel about telemetric data mining in games and the ethics of privacy? I guess, is that to refer to like how developers are using data or basically looking or data mining games, like how long people are playing, stuff like that, XP?
Okay.
Not...
Well, I guess I'm not totally sure where the question is going, but I would say that I think it's good when a company is able to use information to make experiences more for the player. Like, in other words, if we see I guess the less automated version of this is taking the game to conventions. You take a game to a convention and you have a bunch of players play it, and they show you the hotspots. Like they show you the places where they're going to die a lot, and you think, oh, like my game could be better if I think about the player more, and I think about like what their needs are as a player, and like, is it fun to play the game or is it just tedious? And you think about the feedback. I think feedback is really important on all levels, and
if you can get it like on a big level, then that seems cool. I would love, like, we don't have this, but I would love if I had a heat map of every Shovel Knight player and it was just red where they died, because then we could go in and like fix that stuff, or we would have that information for next time.
And then it could have like their name next to it and like their address,
right?
And, like,
and their
go to their
credit
house and
card,
explain and ask them why they screwed up.
Yeah, exactly. You can show up at their house one day going, "Why'd you stop playing my game? What did we ever do to you?"
Right. I mean, obviously, we've been like, I would never want anyone's privacy to be invaded by, like, because they're collecting data about your game playing habits or whatever. That seems like really bad. But I guess if we're like, I think having like some sort of telemetrics, or like even our achievements.
Yeah.
Like in Shovel Knight, we can look at, like, we can see all Steam users and what achievements they've unlocked, and so that way we know this percentage of people got this far, this percentage of people did that. And I'd say we used that information even when we were making Spectre Knight, because we saw how many people had finished Plague Knight, and we're like, oh, nobody.
Yeah.
like
6%.
I guess it's too hard.
Hey, I finished Plague Knight. I did it all.
Well,
you're
the 6%.
one of the 6%.
Yeah.
I think it's it can be used for good, like all things, and I think that it would be dumb of us not to listen to that information. It would be dumb of us not to really consider, like, for example, Plague is a good example. Plague of Shadows was too hard. It was like too many things to do. If we had more hooks in there that we could actually see where the hard parts were, we'd probably have a better understanding. But as a result, we wanted to make Spectre Knight more easily accessible and more like easy, fun, cool. And so, like, the way that we make games, I think, would necessitate a certain level of interaction and understanding of how players are playing our game.
No matter what, even if it's not telemetrics, we would still we would bring in 100 people and see how they reacted to it, because because no matter how long we all sit on the couch and talk about how cool our game design ideas are and what a great implementation of this idea it is, once you put it in front of people, like, there's no way to know. We've made so many games at this point, and it's like it's still impossible to know how people will react when you put something in front of them.
Yeah, the best was when we took it to Minecon, and one of the junior designers here, he's just starting out, and like he had all these levels, and like a lot of the screens were like really complex and like had a set thing, but like when he took it to Minecon and came back, he was just like, oh, I gotta throw everything out. Like, I have to start over.
He had never been to a show, and so he's making all these levels, and it was like, bro, these levels are too complicated.
He's like, no, it's fine.
No, it's fine. And then after the show, he was like, oh my god, I gotta fix it.
Because like for the first time, like,
wow,
played it in front of him, and he.
That's a wake up call.
Yeah,
that's a good.
It's really good.
It's a real good ego check if you think that you're like great and powerful designer
Yeah.
to like go and watch some kids play your game, and you'll see like just how
Yeah, we've all had that experience. It was
Yeah.
like really great having him.
But that's
go
like
through that too.
healing. That's like a healing and good thing.
Yeah, you ripped that scab off. Yeah.
It kind of reminds me of like getting into Super Mario Maker and seeing the community build around that. And
Sure.
one of the things I love about Mario Maker again is that it basically lets almost anyone who can use a Wii tablet or Wii U tablet can make Mario levels. But
Yeah.
there is a very, very big difference between throwing stuff on the screen and having a fully comprehensible level that everything fits. And
Yeah, I think one of the sad things about Mario Maker for me is that like the really well constructed levels don't seem to rise to the top. It's usually the ones that are like really wacky.
Right. A billion Koopa Troopas
Yeah.
per level.
Yeah, but I do like it when someone like thinks about the theming of the level and like they think about like how it looks and not just in terms of like what background they chose, but like when it's a ship level and like all the ship stuff is like put in there well and like they think about the design of like how the player moves through it and the flow of it and it's not too wacky.
Yeah, it's like I think it's just cool that people are being creative in that space and maybe are getting a little bit more knowledge of like exactly what it means to be a level designer or a game designer or how how to iterate through making content that's fun and like realizing just things about anything from how long or short a level should be to how many elements should be in it before it starts to feel too crazy. I don't know. That's been really interesting.
That one's really good to see like change.
Yeah, those Mario Maker levels, I'm still surprised that just like how much of a cluster they are,
and how many there are. It's like a huge like that was like Nintendo's like #1 game, or whatever for that year. I don't know if it's actually #1, but it was like that was a huge game, and all it is like work.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I bought it. I played the game. I played the game for like an hour. I bought it and I was like clicking stuff around, like, what am I doing?
Yeah, I got to actually make this game here.
Josh, that's got to be a new segment for you. Game designers do not like Mario Maker. Here's why.
Yeah.
All right. Now, we've been touching on the design of Shovel Knight. I have, I think, one general question. Then I do want to talk a little bit more about the evolution between Shovel Knight to Plague Knight to Spectre Knight. So this was a question I know for certain that I've asked Dave about several times, but I want to get both of your feedbacks on this as well. When coming up with the difficulty curve for Shovel Knight, as we've said, the game is heavily inspired by the NES era, obviously, and as any of us knows from growing up there were a lot of very hard and painfully difficult games. So how did you guys, I guess, come to terms with the progression curve of, how hard did you want to make Shovel Knight, and, how did you bounce the game around that?
Well, I'd say Shovel Knight should we didn't want it to be what people describe as NES hard, right? Where it's really unforgiving, or where there's like little like gotcha moments that are like mean to the player. We wanted it to feel fair, and we wanted for kids to be able to play it, right? Like if you're under 10, like the same way that I was under 10 when I played Mega Man 2, and I still finished it. I feel like like you can trust kids. Like they're smart. They can beat things. Definitely.
Yeah.
But yeah, overall, we just didn't want to make it too crazy hard, and we tested it a shit ton. Like we went to so many people. We did like a Steam beta where we had a couple hundred people play the game and got their feedback. We took it to shows like Woz was talking about, and watched people and saw how difficult it was.
Yeah, I think it was like you want to make a game that's difficult to play because it's rewarding, not because you want to like mess with the player. You want the player to have fun and like feel like they accomplished something when something's done. Like I don't know, I have friends that have kids and old enough to play Shovel Knight, and when they say like their kid finished Black Knight, and then the kid like celebrates, like throws the controller down and like screams and like that's awesome because there's an element of like having to overcome something, and so like that's the emotion we wanted to capture, of like overcoming a difficult task and not have it be something that's like brutal
like
or
grinding
mean.
you into the ground,
Yeah.
like frustrating. We tried to make a lot of like cheater kind of items too, right?
Right.
Like there's a lot of checkpoints, but you can break them. Like there's the fire rod which lets you attack things far away. There's the phase locket that lets you walk on the spikes. So it's almost like kind of an auto-adjusting difficulty. If you use those items appropriately, then you can make up for some of your shortcomings just when it comes to moment-to-moment gameplay. So the same way that kind of like item 1, 2, and 3 did that in Mega Man 2, or like the extreme version is like that gold Tanuki leaf in Mario. After you die like 5 times, it appears.
Yeah, but I think that's a bad example because that just like skips
It gets rid of it.
gameplay.
Yeah.
But I think that what we tried to do is actually make it like you still have to do it, but you have a lot of tools to make it okay to do. Which is, I mean, it's still hard. Like that means that not everybody can play it.
Yeah, like my mom can't play Shovel Knight.
Yeah.
And I wish she could. And like I wish she could.
Yeah.
Right. It's like she loves looking at it. And I think that's the experience that I've had with a lot of people is they're like, oh man, I love Shovel Knight, and then they play it, but they they can't get past like Pride more.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think it's still a pretty tough game. And maybe in the future there'd be some other ways that we could alleviate that. But I think Spectre Knight is like we did a better job making the difficulty like very smooth. It's always a moving target, and it's like something that's continuous, and it's really hard to please both camps. The hardcore players, like like me, that have been speed running Metroid since 1994, and we want to play a cool game. And an 8-year-old kid that they've never played an NES game, all they played is Minecraft, but they like are looking at the game and they want to have a fun experience too. And the cool part is I think we hit both of those, and there's like examples where it's worked for both.
Yeah, and the reason why it's hard though is because as you're making this game, like you're the expert on it, like you're the best player there is, and like as you're playing it every day, you're becoming better and better, and so like there's this like growing level of difficulty across the whole thing.
Yeah, right.
Where you want to have fun playing this game in the same way that
you make it way too hard.
You make it way too hard because that's fun. Because I think anything too easy is like baby stuff.
You get trapped inside like we're all insulated here at this company. And so that's why it's important to make sure that we bring in people to play the game, or that we allow outside sources to check it out to help give us a reality check. Also,
Shovel Knight was a lot harder.
There's so was Spectre Knight.
So was Spectre Knight. There are builds of both where it's just like, man, this is a lot of fun for us, and everybody else is like, this is my 28th try. You hate me. My friend was doing a thing, and he said like if I wasn't playtesting for you, he's talking to me, like, if I wasn't playtesting for you, I would not be doing this. Right. And it's like, oh, how long have you been trying this checkpoint? He's like, this is my 35th try. I was like, oh, God, no, stop. Just skip it. Like, we'll fix it. I'm so sorry.
But sometimes just the slightest little tweak
like
makes it all, it's just like bringing the ledge in by one tile.
Yeah.
Fix it.
I mean, that was before we had, when you play Spectre Knight, you have that, like, when you're going up, the flames across the character do this, and when you're going down, the flames across do this. And before we had that, you just had to figure it out. You had to learn it. And you also didn't know how close you had to be to something for it to work. You just had to really intuit it. And nobody knew where that space was, and everybody was like always really close to the thing they were going to slash, and that meant that like the difference in time between being above it and below it was like really, really short. And so every time, like, well, I would say like probably like 15% of the slashes, which is a lot, somebody would do it wrong. And so they would be like above it, and then they would slash thinking they're below it, but actually they would just go down into a pit. And so tuning that and getting that flame in there that we call a tear, it was like really it really changed the difficulty level of Spectre Knight a lot.
Yeah.
It was really good at it, I think.
And that's also a really good example. Again, as you're saying, that there's so many little things that can influence a game and make it easier or harder. I was playing Snake Pass this past week, and
cool.
Like one of the things I noticed that there are a few spots that seemed like the checkpoints didn't feel as evenly placed as I thought they would be. And even just moving a checkpoint or putting one additional one can can completely change how a level plays. And the one tile example is another good one. Again, going back to like when I'm playing like Mario Maker, like even just extending this platform by like one tile can make an entire section feel different.
Yep.
Absolutely.
And we
Yeah,
got,
every tile has to be considered.
and we got a few questions in chat. Here's one that I've been wondering myself. Why is it why is he Shovel Knight? Like, where did the shovel come from? Why not Spoon Knight?
So that's a most popular question. And the answer is because it was developed mechanically first. So as we talked about before, we wanted to make a classic NES style game. Generally, those types of games are built around a singular important mechanic, like Mario's jump or Metroid's ball or any of that stuff.
Metroid's ball.
and so for Shovel Knight, we wanted to have something that was like a Zelda 2 down thrust, along with melee combat and breaking through blocks beneath you, bouncing on things. And when we started thinking about all of those actions, the object that would best describe them was a shovel. So we're like, okay, we'll make him a shovel guy, and then everything else came after that, like him being a knight and all the 8 knights and all that stuff. So mechanics first.
I thought you guys were just being inspired by that character from Mystery Men, the guy who used the shovel.
Oh my god. Okay, that Mystery Men thing. Okay, this is when I saw, I don't know, I was watching some movie, and it was the previews, and it was a preview for Mystery Men, and so it was like the beginning was like.
What movie were you watching that had previews for Mystery Men?
I mean, it was something in the 90s.
In the past?
Like, yeah, this is like no, this is like
Blank
1990. Let me take you back to 1996.
Right, I'm ready. Watching the Phantom.
We need the ripple effect here.
Yeah, so I was there in the previews, and it said it was a very generic like superhero thing, right? It's like when it's like sometimes like the world needs heroes, blah blah blah, and then these 2 giant M's go and like crash into the middle of the screen with like electricity, and I was like, oh my god, it's like a Mega Man movie. Like they're making, they're making a Mega Man movie, and then like William H. Macy and Janine Garofalo appeared,
and Ben
Stiller. And it was Mystery Man.
And it was not Mega Man.
And it wasn't the Mega
And it was
Man.
not Mega Man. Hope dash.
Yeah, it's really disappointing.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
All right, and then another question from chat. This one's probably another interesting one regarding the indie scene. And obviously, you guys, for those of you who don't know, you guys, of course, originally came from Way Forward before starting Yacht Club, if I remember right from David. And
yeah.
The question is, what do you guys think of the indie scene? Is the bubble real? Obviously, we're talking about the quote-unquote indie apocalypse that people are been like theorizing about for years now. Like, do you guys what do you think about the indie scene, especially since Yacht Club has been around now for at least 5 years since you guys started with Shovel Knight, probably a little bit before then.
What do we think about the indie scene?
Yeah, I guess. When we started Shovel Knight, it just happened that the first thing we did was like a big hit. So we didn't have to go through the process of like working on a bunch of games and like going through the suffering phase of like no one plays our games.
Except for all those games that Way Forward. That's what you're describing. That's exactly what happened.
What they mean is Yacht Club didn't have to do that.
Yes.
Like we suffered in sort of like a more structured environment. So we never actually experienced like the lone developer doing it and not having success for years and years and years. So I've always felt like we're outside the indie scene just because like as outsiders, like we're not really like going through the same struggles.
When it comes down to it, we're very corporate.
Yeah.
We want to make like big brands, and we run our company like a business.
Yeah, we have employees that have like 401ks and stuff.
Right, like there's we have like health insurance, so that's I'd say that was like a part of what we wanted to do from the beginning. Is like we didn't want to make, it's not like, oh, we have this burning desire to make only Shovel Knight and then fade into the wind. It's like we wanted to make like a cool company that could keep making cool games like forever.
Yeah, Shovel Knight's just the first game.
Yeah, so we really tried to make Shovel Knight like a game that would bring us enough success that we could continue to make more games. And we're just really lucky that we've been so fortunate for it to have the success that it's had. But I don't know. I mean, is it an? You're saying there's an indie bubble?
Yeah,
like
I think what's
like there's
the
too
result
many. There's
is
too
that,
many indie
yeah,
companies.
there is
Is
too
that what
many
you're?
people.
Yeah, there's been that discussion about how so many people are getting the indie scene. There's so many games being put out lately that it's becoming harder and harder again for the cream to rise to the top in a manner of speaking.
Yeah, I
And
agree, and I can think of a lot of games where like I love the game, but nobody's ever played them. Like
Mhm.
one that I'm trying to get people here to play, even that no one's played, is called Environmental Station Alpha. It's got like 5,000 downloads. Last time I checked, but it's a really great, really good game.
I think
But
someone told me to play that one. I haven't played that one yet
yeah,
either.
you should.
Right.
Not Space Station Alpha,
No.
Environmental Station Alpha. It's different.
Big
One's
difference.
a Metroid, one's like a 3D. Anyway, the point being, like, there are examples of great games
Oh yes.
that it's hard to discover them. Partly the way that Steam does this discoverability is
Mhm.
is as automated as possible.
It's like hard. Yeah.
And so you can just be a number. It's really hard just to like get somebody to see your game.
It kind of reminds me of how iOS used to be. Like
Mhm.
iOS, it was like it's the iOS gold rush. You'll go
Yeah.
on there, you'll make $5 billion, and then there was like a flood of iPhone games,
Yeah.
and just like with the indie games on Steam, discoverability is a problem, quality is a problem,
Yep.
and the sameness of everything is kind of a problem. And what you saw happen with iOS is that like some of the small companies got big, and then like also big companies just decided to move in on that space,
Yeah.
and they kind of like pushed the small guys out. And I imagine that maybe something sort of similar will happen on Steam. But the thing is, you already have the big players there, and you already have like medium size companies, or like even like bigger indies like us that are all there.
Yeah, it's
and
very crowded.
yeah, but I mean, it seems like a lot of the good games, like they do really well, and new companies are made. But also, as new companies are made, a lot of other companies go out of business.
Mhm.
So I mean, it just seems like the circle of games, right? Like at some point, I don't know. I guess it doesn't seem to me like there's a bubble, right? Like I don't think the indie bubble's going to burst and now there's like only like two indie companies making games anymore. It seems like there are always people that have cool
Yeah,
ideas.
I mean, I think there always was. There always have been people making games too.
Yeah.
I think there's just a lot of people talking about the indie scene in regards to like now that there's bigger companies.
Mhm.
Now we're looking at it as a whole, and you can see the smaller companies now. But like there were guys making Flash games for years, and there's guys doing like smaller production stuff and on I don't know, like downloads game sites, whatever. But
It's gotten a lot easier though. Also,
Yeah,
like
that's
so,
true.
there's definitely more capability of making games. But making a good game, I'd say, is still just as elusive.
Yeah, just-
as
Yeah.
yeah. I don't know. I don't think there's a bubble. I think it's just like more excitement flourishing around games, and hopefully it just continues.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And
But
before
yeah, you should play Environmental Station Alpha.
I'll add it to my list. I'll put on
Game's
that
great.
never-ending list of games.
I know, right?
Before I get to the other question that was asked, one point I want to go back to what you guys were just saying a few minutes ago was the intention of building Yacht Club as a company to sustain itself. And that I think is a really important point that I think a lot of new developers tend to either don't understand or tend to ignore. That if you want to succeed in this industry, it's less about making that one amazing game that does well for 1 year and then you stop, but it's more about building a company, building a place where you can, keep going. We were, James, you remember when we talked with
Yeah,
Jake Briquette,
longevity. Yep.
yeah, of
I
Gray
remember
Alien Games? Like, he was saying, like,
Yeah.
he hasn't had a major hit, but he's been in this industry for over, I think, like 14, I think,
that. About 14. Yeah, about 15 years. Yeah.
and
Wow.
and it takes, you really need to understand that mindset, especially the business around things, in order to keep going. Like you were saying about regarding Shovel Knight, and like I'm sure you guys have come up with dozens of ideas for games. I'm sure we over here have probably done that as well. But figuring out what game will work the best, what game you can actually market and sell, that is another story entirely.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, we were actually working on another game before we started Shovel Knight, but we decided that it wasn't going to be a good fit for Kickstarter, so we decided just to shelve it. And I mean, that's like the perfect example right there.
All right. And now the other question I was asking, I think this kind of goes back to what we were talking about with the indie scene. What are your guys' thoughts on the upcoming changes with Steam Direct? Obviously, again, for those of you who missed the news, Valve is planning on removing Steam Early Access. No, I'm sorry, Steam Greenlight, and they're changing things around. So if you want to put a game on Steam and you're not established, you have to pay a per game fee, and they're going to be changing things around with discoverability. For those of you watching this live, I think a few days ago, both Jim Sterling and Total Biscuit made videos about talking to Valve, and it's only been something that a lot of developers, both in the indie scene like you guys are, new developers, or like smaller groups, have sort of been thinking about. So, have you guys had a chance to think about what are your thoughts on this?
Well, I guess not too much, just because like breaking into the industry is not a thing that we had to worry about too much right now. I think that
we haven't
just speaking frankly, we have a game that's out there and that we can actually go to Steam and not feel like we're newcomers to the group. But I think for a younger developer, I don't know. I'm of two minds, right? I feel like it's good to have a somewhat of a wall for someone to get into the industry. You have to kind of prove out your ability to put a game and
or just
even
a small
vetting, essentially.
Just having a small amount of just having something to stop just a flood.
Yeah, exactly. There should be something to hold that back a little bit, because I think right now it's really easy to get a game on Steam in terms of just there's hundreds of games on Steam weekly. It's impossible for one person to even be aware of all those games. There's a bunch of sites that I've found online that are just we're going to tell you the games that are out on Steam because it's impossible to know.
Right,
and so and then the website is impossible to read. But I think that it's good to have somewhat of a barrier. I don't know if money is the exact way to do that,
of course,
but it is a way. I feel like that it gets. I think what happens is the discussion moves too much towards the economics of someone who can't afford it but still has a good game, and the ethics of using money as a way to gate that is a separate conversation than actually gating content.
Yeah.
And it's hard to know what's better. Is it better to have someone curate all that, because that just becomes then Steam becomes the curation company, and then their specific tastes dictate what the trends will be.
Right. Who should be in charge? Should Steam be in charge and they choose? Yeah. You're on Greenlight. You're on Greenlight. Yeah. It seems like the community, they tried the community thing because they thought that would be the most fair with Steam Greenlight, but it just kind of didn't work out. And it ended up being a weird thing where everyone was jockeying for Steam Greenlight position, which we did have to do.
We did,
right? Yeah. But then we were number 85, and then we just boop, it was oh yeah, you got it. And we're wait, what? Did we even
it was right at the end of the cusp of when they were being really selective with Greenlight, and then they're everybody's fine.
Yeah, so it was yeah, it was we almost kind of got anointed, and that's but that seems kind of wrong also, that some big brother entity would be choosing what games.
I think,
but the money thing seems like BS, right? Because if you can't afford it, then that shouldn't preclude you from being able to put something out.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I feel that the notion that Steam has to be the one place where everybody goes for games is there's starting to be more and more holes in that idea. And so I think that there'll probably be more venues for you to get games, and that it won't be as weird to go to other websites to buy games in the future.
Right. And then it's oh, you want to go on Steam? Well, it costs $5,000. Is it actually worth it?
Right.
And it's well, screw it. We don't even want to put it on Steam. We'll just put it on something else,
or Humble, or whatever it is. So I feel in the future, as things progress, maybe Steam will have a big price tag, and then that'll mean that other smaller companies can kind of start to form around the idea of I guess what we're talking about is record labels. You have other labels that have maybe an identity of what kind of games they release.
You have Humble, you have GOG, you have itch.io.
Yeah.
Itch.io.
Itch.io.
That's all I ever think is right? He's Itch.io. Chris Dwyer's tweets always say that. All his tweets are Itch.io is better than Steam.
Yeah, I mean, I think more and more of those kind of shops will start to spring up. And I think everybody will kind of understand like Steam can't be the end goal for everybody because it just doesn't work. They're a finite company and they can't make sure that quality is perfect for everyone.
Yeah.
But right now is just kind of a weird time.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So in short,
yeah. So I have no idea.
yeah. we just make the game.
Yeah. All right. One more question, then I think we'll move on to our next section. This was, what do you guys think of the Switch and how Shovel Knight plays on it? Because for those of you who don't know, Shovel Knight came out as one of the launch titles for Nintendo Switch. I know I asked David this, but for you guys, what did you think of working on the Switch and porting Shovel Knight to it?
I mean, I love the Switch. I think it
Sucked. Sorry.
I was gonna say I love the Switch. I love the. I use it all the time. I play it every night, and then what I'll do is I'll play it just as much on the TV as mobile. So I actually feel like I'm getting a lot of use out of my Switch. I personally would like for the directional buttons to be more solid. I like the Pro Controller that the Wii U had.
Yeah.
And I think that the Pro Controller on the Switch is okay.
I think it's really nice.
Yeah, I like it. I think that what's cool about the Switch isn't necessarily that the controller is perfect, but it's the accessibility of the co-op. And I think that's really fun to bring the Switch to somebody's house and you both get to play Switch together now, and you don't have to worry about plugging in controllers and there's a lot of barriers to typical traditional console gaming.
Well, you just just got it.
Really easy.
It's like you have it in your backpack or whatever. I just brought you could just bring it around. I think that's as far as how Shovel Knight plays on it. I think that's the part that's most exciting for me.
Yes.
And I think around the office generally, it's just we could take out 2 controllers, hand them off, and then you can play 2-player. No amiibo required. No anything.
That's great.
And that's
and as we're doing battle mode in the future, it's really exciting to know that multiplayer is a thing that people are thinking about and doing because of the Switch.
Yeah.
So
that's cool. I always take I take my Switch out. I come home and I don't play it, and then I'm I'm gonna go to bed soon, so I take it out and I bring it upstairs and I put it on the table and then I sleep and then I wake up and I go and I put it back down, but I never actually play it. But I intend to. I'm constantly intending to.
Yeah. Once the Mario Odyssey comes out, you'll play it every day.
I'm very excited for Mario Odyssey. Yeah.
I'm glad you mentioned about the amiibo because I asked David this last time, but I gotta ask, are you guys playing any more Shovel Knight related amiibos in the future?
If we were, we couldn't even tell you. Yeah.
That's not a response. Yeah. I guess we love the amiibos out there, and we would be open to it. We have nothing to announce, though.
That'd be the coolest thing.
Yeah. More.
Yeah. But all the amiibo, I think the Shovel Knight amiibos are all gone through.
Oh.
They're if we wanted more in stores, we'd have to do a reorder, right?
You can't.
So
send
I don't
me
know.
one.
Maybe. Say what?
You can't ship me one for free, sadly.
Well, I'm sure we got one. I'm sure we got one back there. But I mean, I think that brings up hey, for a new amiibo or for a new Shovel Knight issue, maybe it could be a different armor color, how one of Shovel Knight's different armors, or it could be different, or maybe there should wouldn't it be cool if there was a amiibo for all the campaigns, a Plague Knight, Spectre Knight, King Knight amiibo. That's, I don't know. That would be the ideal. Well, hell, I'd like to see all of them. But if there was all 4, that'd be really freaking cool. I would love that. Yeah.
Okay. I know we are getting close to our time limit, but I do want to at least touch on the work you guys did with Spectre Knight and Plague Knight. So I think that will probably take us into the final part for the cast then. Because again, if we're not careful, we'll be here till... It's almost 10 o'clock our time. We'll be here till 3 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah,
We're not
be careful.
So, I definitely want to touch on this, and I know for those of you who listened to my chat with David last month, probably this question will be familiar, but I definitely want to ask you guys about this as well. Obviously, over the course of the last few years, we had Shovel Knight, and then came the development updates with Plague Knight and Spectre Knight. And I know it's been talked about how originally these were just going to be simple, palette swaps, maybe be a little bit of a difference here and there, but they have evolved into basically being their own full campaigns. How did you guys, approach saying, okay, here's Shovel Knight over here, now how do we get to Plague Knight here, and then how do we go from Plague Knight and go to Spectre Knight? How do we go these completely different characters in terms of design?
Well, I think I mean originally we were talking about it, and to let you guys know, we as a Kickstarter we had these as stretch goals,
Yeah.
and so we actually put up the idea of what these would be to vote. We had everybody vote on what characters they wanted to play as, and so we put all the guys up there, and it was all 8 bosses, and also the Enchantress, and also Black Knight was in the running, and so we wrote up little descriptions of what their gameplay would be,
like short descriptions.
Short descriptions, just like basic, Plague Knight's about items and about flying through the air and being
throwing
unpredictable.
bombs
And throwing bombs, yeah.
And he's a weirdo.
And he's a weirdo, yeah. And so it was just basic ideas. And I think at that point we realized we didn't want to just have a, just a palette swap kind of thing. We wanted them to feel more unique and you were actually controlling the player or the character as a player.
I think it was very much like a if you give a mouse a cookie situation.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's like, oh yeah, well, what if Plague Knight was a little different? And it's like, well, but then he wouldn't be allowed in the village. What are we gonna do about that? And,
we'll not design
it's under the village. Is there maybe there's cool things down there?
Yeah, you don't want to just play it the exact same way.
Yeah.
You don't just want to use the same things, the same relics, and maybe the levels could be
do all the characters have to be there? Could there be new ones?
Right. And so it just kind of kept going,
yeah.
And while we were working on that, we were also working on Kratos and Battletoads and amiibo stuff,
yeah.
And a lot of things. So I think it was kind of at first it just kind of felt like one module that we were pushing forward, but then it grew into its own thing that ended up just being way bigger than we had anticipated.
Yeah.
And then for Spectre Knight, we just we're well, people have been through this twice, so how are we going to make it a third time and be interesting? Well, why don't we just make a new game, basically? I don't know.
Yeah, I guess going from Shovel Knight to Plague Knight, it was we wanted to, we generally wanted to go through the same levels, but kind of go through them a different way.
Mm-hmm.
Plague Knight he's a villain, so he should circumvent the rules a little bit. He should be unpredictable, and maybe the storyline is a little bit different, and he's undermining what you already know. And so as a character, it was fun to explore the idea of him being who he is in the dialogue and expanding that throughout the whole campaign, and also just approaching our own game with new lenses. We kept talking about not Mario, Lion King 1.5, where you, and I know that sounds really weird,
yeah.
but you see the whole same story through the lens of Timon and Pumbaa.
Right.
So it's it feels like a new experience, and it would warrant its own title, but it's not you're still retreading the same stuff, and so it's is a mix of us wanting to touch back on our own world.
Yeah, and I think that, and also I think doing that kind of enriches the original Shovel Knight world.
Right.
You can explain some things that were never there before, or have some weird ideas that you have to navigate. And for both Plague Knight and Spectre Knight, I think that was one of the most fun parts. Is how do we make it feel different? How do we somehow puzzle piece click this all together into a cohesive thing? It was not planned. Any of it, right? So it's we finished with one, and then we're just okay, here's what we've got to go on.
Yeah,
let's go.
And at the end, the thing that typifies this is at the end of Plague Knight, when you're looking at the flybys after the credits roll, you see Spectre Knight fly into where the locket was, and he opens the chest and he can't fight it, and he gets all mad and he chops the chest in half.
Right, the missing locket.
Yeah, the missing locket, and it's what does that mean? And we were we don't know.
We didn't know.
We had no plan, but we knew that that would be a thing that could become a story point, and that could become something that we pursue.
Right, we know the locket's important to Spectre Knight.
Yeah.
We know Shovel Knight and Plague Knight end up getting it. We know that since we have to fight the same bosses again, that we're going to have to put it before the events of the original Shovel Knight. And so it's all of those things kind of Tetrised into place. And I mean, I think that's what we like doing a lot of times is we'll write ourselves into a corner and have to figure out how to write our way back out of it. But like just like the limitations, like the NES limitations, or like any like time limitations, even having those makes you make decisions that ultimately could make the game a lot more interesting,
more cohesive, more like thematically relevant, and more fun as you're making it.
Yeah, I feel like as we do these interviews more, I feel like we're like solidifying more like what we think about stuff.
Yeah,
I'm ready. Yeah, right. I'm like, well, no, but I feel like it's like it's getting so honed. I'm ready to like go back and it's like, well, what are the principles that we follow? Okay, now I like really know.
Yeah, that's usually when it's time to write a book, right?
Yeah, let's get that book going.
Now, regarding the difficulty, as you said earlier, that Plague Knight was definitely, obviously, a lot more challenging than the original Shovel Knight campaign. That kind of inferred when you went around designing Spectre Knight. And one of the things I noticed with how you guys were positioning Shovel Knight, at least with pricing and such, is that you can now buy each expansion like a la carte, essentially. As you're like coming up with Spectre Knight, and even with designing it for Plague Knight, did you, in terms of its difficulty, were you like assuming that this would be for like new players, or were you building these campaigns essentially saying that this is for people who've already played Shovel Knight or already gotten to a certain point in that game?
I think with Plague Knight, it was like we expected you to have understood Shovel Knight already, but with Spectre Knight, it was like you could jump into it as your first time.
Yeah. It's actually really funny to see people who don't know the story of Shovel Knight like try to come to grips with who the characters are.
Right.
I don't want to spoil anything.
They're like, wait a minute, is this? And it's like a spoiler from the original Shovel Knight because they only played Spectre.
Yeah, because and I guess Spectre explains it, and it is still like thematically like consistent, but it's really funny to like see someone coming from that perspective. But, sorry, that was just a tangent.
For Plague Knight, we're like, okay, well, since everyone already knows Shovel Knight's like the mechanics in the world of Shovel Knight, why don't we just make Plague Knight a very complex and interesting character to learn about, and that'll be like where the fun and newness of Plague Knight comes in. But the problem with that was we assumed that a player playing Plague Knight was already like a master of Shovel Knight, so they would know how the ice collisions work, or like, oh yeah, the bomb takes this long before it blows up, or like these enemies, this is how you defeat them. And so we're like, oh yeah, but in Plague Knight it's a little different. But if you didn't know in the first place what those things were like, then it made it way too hard. I think that was the major miscalculation that made Plague Knight more difficult for people maybe than it needed to be.
Yeah, it was our expectation of where they were at. Because I think once you get into Plague Knight, like basically the learning curve, right? That's sort of what we're talking about. Is that the learning curve was like really high because we expected that somebody would start here as opposed to like down here.
Right.
And so when you start down here, you have to get to that same point that somebody goes from there. And so I think that the learning curve was just really steep. But I've heard a lot of people who like have played both and found that Shovel Knight was harder in the end because they've like once you master Plague Knight, you feel like you're in total control and you don't feel that sense of floatiness. You really understand what to do as a character. Yeah. And so like a friend of mine who like found Shovel Knight very hard thinks that Plague Knight's way easier and would rather do that. He'll play that all the way through every day.
That's cool. I mean, and for all the complaining about Plague Knight's difficulty that we've just done, I also want to say that like I really love Plague Knight, and I think at the office everyone really loves Plague Knight as well, and like I like the difficulty and I like the complexity, but I understand that for some people it wasn't quite the warm embrace.
The gradual learning curve essentially. It was kind of just throwing the player in. Definitely. And that's always very challenging. Again, like we were talking about this earlier with pitching a game like Shovel Knight and trying to appease, your two masters. You have the people who grew up playing all these games, and then you have someone who has no idea who Mega Man is, or has never looked at an 8-bit Mario game, and you're trying to get them to play your game as well.
Sure.
Yeah, I mean, at that point, you just can't make a game that's too referential of the past, and that it can stand on its own and be a thing that like that 10-year-olds can play.
I mean, I loved Mega Man when I was that age, and like I'd never played a Mega Man because there wasn't one. Yeah. So
like it's adaptable.
I think it's the same thing with Shovel Knight. You don't have to have played it, and that's like that's like one of the most magical things for me. Yeah. So when people are like, "Oh, I love Shovel Knight," and like it's like I played Shovel Knight with my dad, and then we played like and then we played all these Mega Mans, or it's like it got me interested in side-scrolling games or in NES games or in the past or whatever.
Yeah,
That's
my 3-year-old who was born during the development of Shovel Knight, she loves Shovel Knight, not because she can play the game at all, just because she recognizes the character. She likes blue, and she likes that the character is like really iconic.
Yeah.
So I'll wear a Shovel Knight shirt because I have a billion of them.
It's like
and it's like my whole wardrobe.
Yeah,
I'm not wearing a Shovel Knight shirt. And she'll go Shovel Knight, or she can't speak really well, so she'll say something like that. And yeah, like I think that character that's like a character that's really strong visually and in silhouette and bright and colorful, like that's a timeless, appealing thing, and that's I think everybody understands that.
Yeah, definitely, and it goes back to what we were saying earlier with like positioning Shovel Knight as this brand. It's a game that the character is easily recognizable. It stands on its own. It goes back to what we were saying regarding elevating the design. That it's not just, again, copying wholesale previous mechanics. It's about taking them further or fitting them into this world of Shovel Knight. And yeah, I definitely agree that the game definitely stands on its own 2 feet there. Now, I guess for you, James, do you have any questions for the guys regarding design or Shovel Knight? I know you haven't had a chance, I think, to fully play the game yet, right?
No, I haven't got a chance to fully play the game, but don't get me wrong, that like I've looked at. I mean, you can't exist in this world without knowing what Shovel Knight is, and it's funny. A lot of my friends, and like back in the day, I was a big Smash Brothers player, and I've seen a lot of people talk about why isn't Shovel Knight on Smash Brothers, and like I think it'd be an amazing fit. So call it.
Yeah, they really wanted to put him in, but we said like, nah.
Oh really? Oh, that was. Oh my God! I was about to. You guys, I was like, oh my God! What?
Yeah, Sean's a joker. No, yeah. I mean,
I'm so funny.
We would all love that. We play Smash all the time. A lot more when it was new. But
we played
every day. Yeah. I'd go home and I have to explain why I was late, and it was always because I was
working hard.
I was losing at Smash. Better. So yeah, I would love to have Shovel Knight in there. But I mean that's up to Nintendo.
I'd love to have Shovel Knight in Mario Maker.
Yeah.
How about that? Yeah. How about we start with Mario Maker?
Shaun the Sheep needs to.
Shaun the Sheep. If Shaun the Sheep and Hello Kitty and Mercedes car.
Mercedes car is the best.
And what was it? What's the baby? Whatever. Baby.
Is Boss Baby in there?
No, not Boss Baby. Like what is that? They're a band.
I don't know.
What are they? They're called like Murder Baby or something. What are they?
I don't know. Oh wait, no, I know what you're talking about. Is it Metal Baby? Baby Metal?
Baby Metal.
Yeah.
Baby Metal. Oh, okay, Baby Metal.
If
yeah.
Baby Metal's in there.
Are they really?
Yes. Yes. And Shovel Knight's not in there. It's like 3 of them. Like,
well, it's because Baby Metal has an amiibo, right?
Anyway.
Let's call Nintendo right now. Let's get them on and just pitch all these ideas to them. I'm sure they'll take them all.
Yeah.
But yeah, one of the things about Shovel Knight, again, is that it has been on multiple platforms. And I think, I'm pretty sure I asked David this, but for the folks listening, did you guys handle, besides obviously making the PC version, did you guys do any of the porting, in-house for, the PSN and all that stuff?
All of it.
Yeah, we ported everything.
except for Amazon Fire TV.
Yeah, but I mean, even that was done. Even that was done with an offsite person who we've worked with a million times, and who
with our tech.
Okay.
Yeah, so it's all. Yeah, I mean, there were no outside companies were involved in porting Shovel Knight to any other platform. That's why it's taken so long for us to get it all out.
We gotta do
yeah, but we want to make sure that we're doing it right also. So we just have very exacting standards, I guess. So yeah, please, thank you for your patience.
All right. I know we are approaching 10 o'clock our time. I think it's like around 7 your guys' time. So I'm
Mhm,
sure
yeah.
you guys have to get going in a few minutes. Again, we could sit here for a few more hours, but I'm sure everyone's
Sure.
getting a little bit tired here.
Yeah.
But I guess to wrap things up, I guess a few just like general questions for you guys, and then we'll see if James has anything, and then we'll say goodnight. So I guess the first thing is, as we said, as we're recording this right now, the Spectre Knight expansion is out for the PC. It will be out onto the other platforms as well. For the folks watching this, when I spoke with David, we talked at least a little bit about the fact that the next one will be, of course, King Knight. Is there
Yeah.
anything you can reveal to the folks about that at this point, or is it still mum's the word?
We're still. I mean, honestly, we're still like figuring it all out here. Also,
Yeah, it would be a spoiler to us if
yeah.
someone told us
Why don't you
what
tell
King
us?
Knight would be.
Yeah, well,
Okay.
it's like, well, what do you think it is?
Yeah, we'll take notes.
Right.
Yeah. Oh yeah, interesting.
Yeah, we have a couple of things in store, but it's very much like in the middle of development right now. So there's nothing. Yeah, I don't think there's really anything that we could talk about.
Okay.
So,
Sorry.
And when I did speak with David last one, he sort of like gave like a rough idea of what you guys are working on. So now that it's been like a month later, I guess for the folks listening, what do you guys have planned for Shovel Knight, or what will, I guess kind of like what's your plans for like the rest of this year? I guess if you thought that far ahead.
yeah, I think that right now we're going to be moving once like right now it's all submission, so we're just making sure that the game is out everywhere.
Yeah.
But once nobody is like having to deal with that, we'll be moving full time into both King Knight and a new project that we haven't talked about at all.
Yeah.
And well, I mean, publicly,
We talked
just-
a little bit about it.
we just
I
had a
mean,
meeting earlier.
publicly. We said we promised that we're going to start working on something new this year
Yes.
in March, and
And
I guess we missed it.
it's
Just like
it's
all
late
dates,
March.
just like all dates, we missed it
Well, I mean, I guess we started talking about it.
a little bit. So yeah, that's getting going.
Yeah.
King Knight is like going to be in the full swing of things this year, and also battle mode. 4-player couch not couch co-op, couch
Multiplayer.
whatever, couch multiplayer battle mode.
Yeah.
Which is already relatively far into development.
Yes.
We spent a little bit of time on it last year, and all the characters are playable, and it's fun, and it's cool, and it still has a while to go, so we're going to be working on that too. Yeah, and then I mean, heck, we have tech people working on new tech things for if we were going to make some cool new, more futuristic looking stuff someday. There's like all sorts of things. There's some new people. We're gonna bring on some new people.
Yeah.
Not
right.
too many, but like a couple.
Yeah, right after this call, I'm going to talk to the guy that we're hiring.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, wow. That's cool.
Oh, wow.
And I guess obviously you guys are on working something brand new in the coming months. Do you see yourselves working on, or I guess keeping with the 8-bit style for another game, or do you think that it will mainly stay with like Shovel Knight going forward?
Well, I think that the 8-bit style is a thing that worked for Shovel Knight, and I think it could work for another game, and that we're not opposed to it. It's something that we like to work in. It all just depends on like what makes sense for us as we talk about the title more. I think anything that you see Shovel Knight is going to be in that same style, like or for this round of game, like King Knight and Battle Mode. But in the future, I mean, we all want to do a 3D platformer. We all want to do all kinds of weird stuff. I'd love to do something that's totally weird. Maybe like it'd be fun to do like a virtual void game. I don't know.
Yeah.
Like it's
Something
it's not like
in-
we have a like restriction on what the company does.
Yeah, like all sorts of different styles, or like we've been hesitant to want to do a 16-bit game just because of the amount of colors and animation overhead and everything. What's so great about Shovel Knight is that you can make something and you can iterate on it really quickly, so the gameplay can get good fast.
Yeah.
And when you make something that has art that takes forever, it's really hard to get that loop going as
Definitely.
quickly.
Yeah, you settle faster. You don't want to have to
Right.
redo
It's like, dude, I don't want to.
everything.
Yeah, I don't want to redo
It's like
it.
all the animations are done, let's just make it work.
Right.
Whereas with Shovel Knight, it's like, yeah, throw it away. Like, let's start over.
Yeah. That being said, I think if we were going to put out a new game and it looked it just looked like an NES game again, then maybe that wouldn't be quite as exciting to people.
Yeah.
Maybe we could come up with a new style that's like for instance, Hyperlight Drifter is in a low color, low animation, low resolution style, but it looks striking and interesting. Looks very different than new. It looks different than like any other game, right? And it'd be cool if we did something like that, or something like Mother 3, or something that doesn't really have a specific, like something that doesn't peg it to a specific era necessarily, but maybe kind of does a little bit. Yeah, I don't know. I think there's like a lot of options to explore
there.
Yeah. Or like Super Brothers Sword and Sorcery looks super cool.
Yeah.
And is like a very but that's just like a pixel. It's pixel, but it's not placed in the era.
To speak to that, it's like I don't think we would ape those styles. What we're saying is like there are ways to do pixel art and low resolution art that doesn't require us to stick to 8-bit NES.
Of course, I don't mean rendered in a similar style. I just mean like
here are some examples of like games that have done their own unique thing. So maybe like we can figure something out like that.
Yeah, but I think making something that's like visually striking, and I think anything we make is going to be like bright and colorful and cool. Yeah.
Cool. All right. For those of you watching this now, if you're watching live, we're going to be wrapping up in the next few minutes. If you have any last-minute questions for the guys about Shovel Knight or Yacht Club, be sure to get that in. I guess for you, James, do you have any final questions before we start to wrap things up?
I'll have a little bit of a comment. I just think it's funny. It's like, well, we didn't get invited to Smash Brothers, but we're gonna do our own. Yeah.
Yeah. Don't get that excited. It's not. It is not to the Smash Brothers level. It's a lot more simple, but I think it'll still really be fun for people, and hopefully something that you play more than a couple of times. Hopefully you could come back to it over and over again.
All right, and I just, with Spider Night being out, I just played a little bit of it earlier today. I'll be uploading, I'm going to be trying to do a Let's Play of it for the YouTube channel. And I'm going to say one of my favorite parts about, at least in terms of like the animation, is with the Black Knight. I just have to get this out. When the Black Knight shows up and he's on his turtle, and like he starts cackling, and then the turtle starts like cackling along with him. For some reason, that made me laugh really bad. I was just like watching the turtle mimic him.
Yeah, you hear the whoop whoop whoop. And
that was like all of our everyone was like, as soon as we got the turtle, we're like, oh, and Black Knight's gotta laugh and the turtle's gotta laugh too. It's like everyone like hooted and hollered when that one did. Really good. It was funny. Yeah, like Morgan was just like, he was like, oh my god, he laughed. It was like so good.
Yeah. All right. And for you folks watching this live, I think the first episode of it will probably be going up tomorrow. For those of you watching this recorded on YouTube, it should already hopefully be up with more episodes to come. But I think we're going to say goodnight here. So if you guys wouldn't mind hang on for like 20 seconds when we're done the stream, just to ask you a few post-stream questions. And we will say goodnight. So, for those of you who've been watching either live or record, thank you so much for tuning in. If you're new, be sure to like and subscribe. And you guys, thank you so much for coming on tonight. Again, congratulations with the success of Shovel Knight. And tell David I said hello as well if he's still out there, back there somewhere.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Thank you so much. I mean, we really appreciate the opportunity. And I guess Spectre Knight's out on Steam, so go buy it. If you already have Shovel Knight, then you get it for free, so you don't even need to buy it.
Right.
But maybe you should buy it on another platform.
Like
and
the
those
Switch.
are all on the Switch. Yeah, like the Switch.
Hit the Switch.
And all those platforms, if they're not out, are going to be coming out soon.
And buy more Shovel Knight amiibos too. Get as many of them as you can.
No, there's no more.
Do what you can.
There's no more. Don't look for any more Shovel Knight amiibo.
Oh.
I mean, you could look for one, and it wouldn't be a waste of life.
You're not going to find one. You're not going to find
one.
Yeah.
All right. So for you guys watching this live, we are going to wrap things up. For those of you on right now, I think we may do a late night stream of something. I'm not sure what. It'll just be me. Unfortunately, we won't have the whole gang here. But I'll probably be on later tonight. Hopefully, you'll get the notification. Again, for those of you watching this recorded, you're probably a week late for that. But again, be sure to again like and subscribe if you're new, and check back daily for more content here and on Game Wisdom, where we examine the art and science of games. And as they were saying, be sure to check out Shovel Knight, now available just about everywhere, I think, with the Spectre Knight expansion slowly but surely rolling out to all the platforms. So, again, guys, thanks for coming on, and hopefully we can talk again soon. Maybe we can get all three of you,
yeah.
get David on as well. We can have just a whole Yacht Club chat sometime.
Yeah,
Sure,
we
yeah,
got to do this again.
We got lots of people that we could put on this couch.
All right.
Yeah.
All right. So, with that said, again, you folks watching, we're going to end things here. Have a great night, and I guess we will catch you all next time. See you all then.